We are less than 20 days into 2026, and I am already completely done with it. Last week, I cracked an hour in this show for the first time. Let's see if I can get back under 45 minutes this week, though, given some of my stories, I don't have high hope. I have very few hard and fast rules when it comes to this show, but chief among the few I do have is to always include Gavin Newsom's proper appellation, Trump 3.0, whenever I speak about him. The second rule is I do not cover marginalized drama. Before we were all living under genocidal fascists, that rule would have been in place to avoid feeding into the circular firing squad such things can become. In the year of our Mutt 2026, that bit is still quite present, but more pressingly, I also just won't give fascists or their chud retinues the ammo. I need to clarify, that doesn't mean I refuse to cover when marginalized people do something fucked up, evil, or especially something cool and new. But I don't focus on the drama aspect. Which drama am I referring to? Who knows? It could be one of like 5 things from the last 2 weeks, given my circles, but drama is fun. For those not embroiled in it, at least. Look, I'm catty. I enjoy being a bit of a I won't deny it. But that's why I find healthy outlets for it and don't fire off at anyone who could be hurt by my words. Have you seen Ugliest Houses in America or Crime Scene Kitchen? They're both great for this because even the folks on the show are catty about their own homes and dishes or weird true crime stuff. Look, Crime Scene Kitchen is a very strange show, but I do actually recommend it. And let me tell you, as a former pastry chef, some of the most fun nights of my life involve pitchers of margaritas and a bunch of pastry cooks roasting or hyping up the bakers on Crime Scene Kitchen and Great British Bake Off or the chefs on Cutthroat Kitchen. It's all about finding a healthy outlet which doesn't hurt others as well. I'm sure none of that will be on the periphery of today's show. Oof. And welcome to Muttday Morning News. I'm the titular Mutt Fen. Now let's get to some news. Show of hands, who here knows what the Overton window is? Basic idea, it describes the currently accepted political climate. For example, in 2016, the NBA pulled the 2017 All-Star Games from Charlotte, North Carolina, over the state's trans bathroom ban, and received wide support for it. While in 2026, 27 states have passed laws enforcing trans discrimination in healthcare, bathrooms, and sports, to the degree Linda McMahon's Department of Education is investigating a school for allowing a trans girl into a co-ed cheerleading team. Just in case it wasn't clear that the point isn't fairness in sports, which, were that the case, Michael Phelps wouldn't be allowed to compete, but excluding trans women and girls from public life entirely. But this story isn't about the United States' ongoing genocide of trans people, it's merely an illustrative example. No, this story is about Bari Weiss, the radical centrist, read fascist collaborator, who went from New York Times op-ed columnist to a middling substacker so unthreatening she was never even sued, despite repeatedly printing libel, to riding a $150 million golden parachute into the editor-in-chief position at CBS News after it was bought out by a Trump ally, billionaire Larry Ellison. After spiking a 60-minute special on CCOT, actually, that aired last night with no announcement, and I have not had time to see if it has been changed or edited. The El Salvadorian death camp Trump sent 238 Americans to over a claimed lack of comment. The administration did comment.
The Department of Homeland Security declined our request for an interview and referred all questions about CCOT to El Salvador. The government there did not respond to our request.
That whole segment is on archive.org, link in the description. She's trying to shift the window even further. I've joked before about Fox News and the New York Times functioning as states media, even as Trump tried to take an utterly irrational $15 billion out of the New York Times hide, but Bari Weiss is leaning in even harder to exactly that position. First, after Jonathan Ross murdered Renee Nicole Good, Bari Weiss's CBS News published a report on January 14th that Ross suffered internal bleeding to the torso, according to 2 U.S. officials briefed on his medical condition. Let's unpack all of that real quick. First of all, this bruise, which may or may not decide to show up on camera, counts as internal bleeding of my torso, which is why normally a reputable journalist would not act as the mouthpiece of a government which just butchered a woman in the street, but would instead follow up, get pictures, talk with the doctors who treated Ross, or even question how he was wounded when the videos we have exhaustively analyzed, because there are of course multiple, including the one Ross himself took, show that he was never hit by the car, much less in any danger, and walked away under his own power to his own car, which he drove away. I forgot that those are on right now. Oh well. CBS staffers have expressed the same concern in anonymous statements to several papers, including one staffer who told The Guardian Weiss was taking a special interest in the story during the morning stand-up meeting that same day. For a sense of how insubstantial this report is, the New York Times and NBC mentioned the report offhandedly, as in one sentence, in related articles, and while Fox News did run a story entirely on it, it was 287 words, and after you cut out the quotes, which made up about 33% of it, only 193 words, even they still concluded with the extent of the bleeding was not immediately clear. But that's only some of the damage Weiss has done to the Overton window. Freedom of the press is enshrined in the Constitution because we are supposed to be the fourth estate, keeping the executive, judiciary, and legislature honest by informing the people on what they do. We should not be their friends, which is why the report from The Independent on the 16th is damning, despite sounding so utterly banal at first glance. Former and current staffers informed The Independent that just after the 60 Minutes interview between Norah O'Donnell and Donald Trump in November, mere moments after Trump very pointedly said he'd actually never met Weiss, she revealed she was on location and greeted the dictator with a reciprocated cheek kiss. That is simply not a thing journalists would ever do. Remember again, fourth estate. But an ass-kissing fascist running a nepotistic state's media desk? Yeah, that's how they'd meet a murderous dictator who's just raking through the Epstein files. Oh wait, no, he hasn't published any more of those, in violation of a law he signed in November. Oy vey, the Democrat governors have had yet another disappointing week. I mean, when have they not? Gavin Trump 3.0 Newsom decided being wrong but strong wasn't enough anymore. He needed to look like a spineless toady, too. He decided it was in his best interests to go on a podcast with Ben Shapiro, the man so self-conscious about his effect on women, he can't say the word pussy while describing how his wife had a doctor's note explaining women shouldn't actually get wet when turned on. I've seen a few folks confused why a Democrat would go on the podcast of a right-wing extremist who, like the dead Nazi Charlie Kirk, calls for the extermination of trans folks and Palestinians. But the reasons are very simple. Trump 3.0 Newsom is a fascist, whom I've only seen smile while destroying the property of his homeless constituents or while talking about how much he's never taken money from oil barons or the tech gentry. He just pushes their legislation for the love of the game, I guess. And most importantly, he didn't go on Shapiro's podcast. Trump 3.0 invited Shapiro onto his own podcast, then spent the entire time and uhing his way through agreeing with every single thing Shapiro said. Actually, no. There was one singular time he pushed back at all on Shapiro, and it was to bring up a singular trans person whose name and pronouns he respects. Yes, of course it was Caitlyn Jenner. He's a fascist genocide denier who is actively blocking his own state from taxing billionaires, not even, again, for money, just because. Vetoed bills that would protect his trans and queer constituents in order to defend the profit margins of insurance companies, and vetoed an AI regulation bill while openly admitting it was because the law would ban all chatbots from interacting with children. Key point on that last bit, the law would have made it illegal for Gen AI chatbots to interact with children unless they could assure the state of California they wouldn't sexualize children or convince them to commit suicide. Again, Gavin Trump 3.0 Newsom vetoed a bill which would regulate AI sexualizing and killing children, not because it wouldn't work, but because he admitted in his own veto that he feared it would block all LLMs from accessing children. Actually, he phrased it as children from accessing LLMs because he admitted in that they all do it and none of them are being stopped. Trump 3.0 is quite literally responsible for Elon Musk and Grok becoming the world's largest purveyor of CSAM. Jared Polis of Colorado, meanwhile, gave his final State of the State address on Thursday, and the best summary I can give is Senioritis with a side of tech and Trump sycophancy. I've linked the Colorado Sun's full transcript and analysis in the description, but highlights include the governor praising Trump, memorializing a state senator who died when she rear-ended a truck. She was drunk driving at the time. Polis's continued attempts to earn his Palantir money, hyping AI while slighting the AI regulatory bill he conditionally signed and has been demanding legislators now kneecap for almost a year, and all the income and property tax cuts he brought to the state, mostly to the wealthy and ultra-wealthy, which have led to our $1 billion budget shortfall. While he did not mention it in his speech, Polis did also call Tina Peters' 8.5-year sentence, of which she's already served more than a year of, harsh, a far cry from his September comment, "Justice cannot be bought." The Denver Post and Colorado Sun followed up by asking why, since 2023, Polis hadn't released any of the prisoners serving multi-decade sentences for crimes committed as minors who can appeal for clemency through a program he championed. Polis made a series of non-committal noises. One can barely even qualify as a statement. Actually, I saw this cursed post a few days ago, and since I had to put it in my brain, now you do too. And then there's Tim Walz of Minnesota, who watched the Trump administration murder one of his constituents, then told them to not take the bait. Hey, old man, they're killing queer women in the street. It ain't bait anymore. I cannot stress this enough. ICE and Border Patrol have kidnapped so many Minnesotans out of their cars, the city of Minneapolis announced free reclamation from impounds if your car was found abandoned after ICE kidnapped you. Assuming, of course, they let you go. But at the time of writing, Walz is calling up the National Guard for the next 72 hours, today being the last day that they're theoretically called up, to assist local law enforcement and public safety agencies, which is to say, protect the cops who've been aiding and abetting ICE in Minnesota, while Trump called up the 11th Airborne, an Arctic fighting force based out of Alaska, from what should have been a 4-day weekend to stand by just in case he declares ICE's murdering and pillaging of Minnesota to be an insurrection. On Saturday the 17th, Trump announced in a tediously rambling post to, again, his own social media site, which he owns outright, which reads actually more like a Stephen Miller racist wet dream than Trump's usual dementia-powered absurdity, a 10% tariff, aka a tax paid by the U.S. consumers, on imports from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and Finland. The weird part is that's technically good news. Well, less awful news than anyone was expecting. Please don't let a shooting war with Greenland and Denmark start after I wrote this on Saturday. But of course, this story just keeps developing. See, the tariffs were in response to small contingents. I mean, literally some of these were like 15 people of French, German, Swedish, Norse, Finnish, Dutch, and UK military forces landing on the small island of a Danish territory, which Mercator projections have convinced a certain orange fascist he needs because it's actually huge. I love when countries that have been our allies for decades have to set up defenses against a literal invasion. I guess this makes Venezuela the Poland of this century and Greenland the France? President Macron of France has proposed using the EU's own never-before-activated anti-coercion instrument, which, if activated, would allow EU leadership to employ their own retaliatory tariffs on the US or go so far as to block trade with the US altogether. I do have one piece of good news in obedience training this week. Congressman Shri Tanadar, representing Michigan's 13th district, introduced a new piece of legislation to the House on January 15th. H.R. 7123, the Abolish ICE Act. It does what it says on the tin. It's a refreshingly direct bill. It has only 3 sections, the one giving it, well, the shorthand name, the one describing ICE's various crimes, including the at least 39 murders ICE agents are responsible for since Trump took office. It's actually significantly higher than that, but it wasn't a complete list, at least because ICE intentionally does not keep many records, so numbers of the people they've killed and or deported illegally is likely much higher. The final section, well, essentially lays out exactly how it abolishes ICE. It overrides the Homeland Security Act of 2002, which created ICE, rescinds all current funds and denies further appropriations, and orders the agency dissolved in no less than 90 days from the law's enactment. It obviously faces a uphill battle as Republicans outnumber Democrats in the House and Senate, even before contending with the presidential veto or the fact that so many Democrats have died in office this year, especially while other Dems who still maintain office threaten ICE with additional funding for training on top of the $30 billion a year budget, more than 3 times ICE's previous annual budget, Congress already gave them in that stupid, ridiculously named bill. So remember to vote with your upcoming primaries for actual leftists, assuming we have upcoming primaries, so the Dems can't run centrist cowards like Michael Bennet or the genocidal fascists like John Fetterman. But in the more immediate term, you can call your senators and House reps to push for H.R. 7123 and for the impeachment of Donald Trump. Oh, and the impeachment submitted for the DHS secretary, Christine Noem. That officially has at least 80 Dems actually signed on for it. Actually, related to all of this, I've thrown a ProPublica story I don't have the time or, frankly, the stomach to try and make jokes about down in the description. It's a lot, but I think it's an important read as to why more training is not the answer for those who still think abolish ICE, abolish the police, or even the more paltry defund the police are bad slogans or something. They must be destroyed. You cannot fix organizations whose entire purpose is to train men how to exact violent oppression upon the bodies of their fellow human beings, especially when they're kidnapping 16-year-olds, blinding them for life, and selling their phones to reseller vending machines outside their offices. Okay, this is something that actually happened last night, and I don't have scripted. Donald Trump sent a letter to the Prime Minister of Denmark last night, which reads, "Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize, they had no part in that, for having stopped 8 wars plus." Okay, 1, it used to be 10, and To my knowledge, he stopped none. The killing is still going on in every single country where he claims to have stopped a war. I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. He's never thought purely of peace. He's never thought of peace before in his fucking life. Although, it will always be predominant. But can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect the land from Russia or China. And why do they have a right to ownership? Right of ownership? Anyway, there's no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago, and we had boats landing there also. I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do something for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you, President DTJ. Like, barring the fact that that was basically illegible, irrational rambling, please do not make me have to report on the beginning of World War III. I do not want to report on the beginning of World War III. The France, Poland, Venezuela, Greenland thing was a joke. It was a joke. Why are you... How about I do another rapid-fire AI news roundup again? Those are always... Fun is the wrong word, but it's the only one coming to mind. You may have heard of Wikipedia signing a deal with a bunch of AI companies, namely Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, Perplexity, and Mistral. That is entirely true. And while Jimmy Wales, the co-founder of Wikipedia, is ride or die for the CSAM generators and is extremely here for this partnership, I will also point out Jimmy Wales, who for some reason everyone keeps reaching to for comment, has had nothing to do with Wikipedia since 2006. He is, however, the president of Wikipedia's most vile and ad-swarmed clone, Fandom. As for Wikipedia itself, this is actually a deal more for the benefits of its human users and, to a lesser extent, its own economic backing. All of those companies were already scraping Wikipedia for data. In fact, Grok openly does so and does not have a deal with Wikipedia. That's not even remotely in question. All this changes is that instead of using the public free API access or DDoSing the free encyclopedia with data trawlers, the assorted AI companies are now paying Wikipedia for a separate, higher speed, higher volume API access. This is the opposite, and arguably the more normal version of Disney paying OpenAI $20 billion to allow ChatGPT to generate text, images, and videos using the mountains of Disney's intellectual property that OpenAI stole. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with stealing from Disney, but you know what I mean. The tech gentry aren't happy merely destroying human labor, pay, creativity, and contributing to global climate collapse. No, ma'am! They're also here for ruining personal computing! If you haven't heard, Windows 11 is purportedly at least 30% written by AI now, and it's been causing all manner of issues, with the most wildly publicized last year being that period where Windows 11 couldn't see solid-state drives. Well, Microsoft started out 2026 on the exact same foot. The first security update for Windows 11 this year introduced yet more fun bugs, mercifully only to PCs running version 23H2. Of course, that's more of an issue since folks aren't actively updating Windows 11 as often because it keeps introducing new bugs when you do that, as opposed to just the security updates, because this was just a security update that did this. The bug itself was particularly annoying as it prevented many PCs from shutting down or entering sleep mode, and in a couple of cases, even exiting from remote desktops. It took 4 days, but a hotfix was released on the 17th. And lest you think it's just Windows, the AI bubble has officially ballooned hard drive costs by an average of 46% since September alone. That's not even SSDs, that's hard drives in general. Okay, this one actually hurts me on a very visceral level. The artist behind the Dinotopia books, James Gurney, who rather famously used to create wireframes and clay sculptures as reference material for his drawings, has gone full AI Slopmonger, posting Gen AI crap whenever he can, going so far as to even run an AI chatbot on his site. While disappointing, learning he's gone off the deep end has reminded me how good his old actual art used to be. And I might see if I can hunt up some used copies of the Dinotopia books from local bookstores, or see if my mom still has any of my old ones, so I can look at them without having to give him or his publishers any more money. After laying off more than 4,000 people of their, at the time, 9,000 in September, claiming their jobs were being made redundant by AI, Salesforce has spent the last week kind of publicly admitting that they wildly jumped the gun after believing that technology could do, well, the things that every C-suite executive and tech gentry twit claimed it could. And since C-suite executives are basically the only people whose jobs actually could be replaced by regurgitative CSAM generators built on stolen work, they listened to what the billionaires said. They've seen massive issues with the LLMs to the degree that their remaining staff spend more time trying to placate angry customers and putting out fires the LLMs cause than they ever did before. That's not even accounting for the sudden loss of institutional knowledge and experience, as many of the fired staff were long-term customer-facing roles, meaning many of the remaining engineers don't even have time to try and fix the useless Azathoth ex machina because they've now been thrown into customer support. So I haven't seen Stranger Things Season 5 yet, but I did happen to hear about and look into the making of documentary. And yes, I see you wondering why this is in the AI rapid fire. Well, that's because in the documentary, the Duffer Brothers' computer screen is in shot a few times, and, well, obviously just to show scripting process, which was also weird because that's not how scripts are normally formatted, but that's not really here nor there. You can do whatever you want when you're writing your own script. The issue that folks noticed was that next to the scripting tab, there are 3 ChatGPT tabs open. Frankly, no, I'm not saying the Duffer Brothers had ChatGPT write the entire season, and that's why it's bad. Again, I haven't actually seen it. I don't know if it's bad. But why in the hell would you ever have 3 ChatGPT tabs open on a work laptop unless you're, using them for work? And I haven't even mentioned Grok yet. Yes, Elon Musk's predictive keyboard and personal CSAM generator, which XAI themselves admitted lost $1.46 billion in the last quarter alone, isn't done ruining all of our lives. Despite generating more CSAM than ever previously existed through all of human history in the last 3 weeks, despite Grok doxing random X users on a whim, and despite Musk's last sperm surrogate he expected to raise his child solo, Ashley St. Cloud, suing Musk, alleging Grok generated images of the Jewish woman wearing a swastika micro bikini with a tattoo reading Elon's whore, using a photo of her at 14 as the base image. Grok is now getting access to U.S. military records, databases, and employee information, according to Pete Hegseth. Apparently, he's less than satisfied with the skinned-over ChatGPT bot, GenAI.mil, after it accurately described the murder of Venezuelans as murder, and wants it replaced with the only LLM that is actually pro-invading Greenland. I sincerely wish any of those were jokes. Oh, and on that Ashley St. Cloud front, she's apparently soured so much on Musk because of all of this, she's frankly renouncing a lot of her previous conservative commentator chicanery and offering a legitimately contrite apology for her historical transphobia. That's more than Brianna Wu managed, and Wu is an actual trans woman. Then again, Wu was also back to slurring her fellow trans sisters within 20 minutes of her faux apology. So the bar is, frankly, so low it's in hell. St. Cloud has already topped that about 100 times over. And maybe reading a real apology will read as important for a later story. Okay, I needed one positive AI story in this week, and here's the perfect one! Bandcamp, one of the few remaining places to buy music instead of renting it or streaming it, has a new official anti-AI policy, and it's, like the Abolish ICE Act, refreshingly straightforward. There's no couched language, it's very simple. There are just 2 points on it. Music and audio that is generated wholly or in substantial part by AI is not permitted on Bandcamp. Part 2, any use of AI tools to impersonate other artists or styles is strictly prohibited in accordance with our existing policies, prohibiting impersonation and intellectual property infringement. You really can just say that. You don't have to pull a Nebulas and try and carve out a weird excuse for your personal friend. Out of the AI news, Discord has been speedrunning a complete demolition of their goodwill in 2026. Arguably, they're still building up on that goodwill demolition from 2025, but yeah, it all compounds. I don't know who they're racing against necessarily, but unless it's Trump or Brainworm Bobby, they are definitely winning. Since their confidential IPO last week, Discord launched, then took down in less than a day, a user survey transparently looking for justification to shove investor-beloved AI features into their forum replacement. This week, Discord surprised many European and even some US users by rolling out an experiment on the previously hacked age verification system by sending it to new markets where it's not legally required. I don't think I need to say it, but age verification systems do not prevent harm. They are, however, a great excuse to force your users to fork over buckets of sellable personal data, legal IDs they make no pretense of protecting, and to provide facial training data to AI language models. Of course, Discord's particular AI system has many well-documented failures, and has been hacked at least once before, exposing tens of thousands of Australians to identity theft with no recourse for them and no consequences to Discord, of course. But sure, let's expand it into whole new markets for absolutely no reason or benefit. Oh, well, except to Discord's potential investors. The focus on these systems has never been about stopping adults from abusing children, but making sure children and teens can't access communities and information, which in turn makes them easier to abuse. A lot of hay is made about stranger danger, but by and large, the majority of rape and abuse of children is perpetuated by family members, especially parents, treating their own children like property, not human beings. We really need a child rights revolution, quite frankly. Why must there always be one story in Vet Visit, and why must it always be evil? Oh, right, because Brainworm Bobby Kennedy is determined to kill as many women and children as possible. The good news is, the outcry over the program I'm about to discuss has been so significant, partially because Kennedy was trying so hard to keep it a secret, it's already been kiboshed. The money that Kennedy was trying to send to Danish scientists running a decade-plus-long unethical series of experiments was kiboshed, but, they're still trying to do it, just without the US's money. There's a link to the Substack, which broke the story in the description, but the basic idea was this. For decades, 2 Danish scientists have been arguing with zero evidence or proof that all vaccines carry some kind of generic, unspecified health risk which shortens lifespan despite their own repeated production of evidence to the contrary, in an attempt to prove their evidenceless theory correct again. Because, they've been failing to do this for decades. They're looking to run a wildly unethical double-blind study in Guinea-Bissau, using the country's planned 2027 rollout of infant hepatitis B vaccine dosing to run an experiment where infants whose parents will not be aware they're going to be enrolled unwillingly in a double-blind study would be given randomly either the real vaccine or a placebo of the Hep B vaccine we've been using since 1986. See, this is the thing. You can't ethically double-blind a vaccine for a deadly disease for the same reason you can't double-blind hormone replacement therapy. The effects are rather obvious in both cases. With the latter, you either suddenly feel like a functional human being and get rockin' tits, or you don't feel like a human, don't grow rocking tits, and it's extremely obvious your doctor is medically torturing you for fun. As for the former, you're either effectively immune to Hep B with almost no side effects, almost no because technically itchiness at the injection site counts as a side effect, or you encounter Hep B and it kills you slowly and painfully. You cannot double-blind these things, you murderous shits. This story has been weird from start to finish. Short version, Bari Weiss threw Tony Dokoupil onto the anchor slot of CBS's evening news recently in a bid to revitalize the show's flagging viewership. Dokoupil, who I assume you haven't heard of because you're watching an internet comedy news show hosted by a chimeric trans girl and clearly have better things to do, was previously most well known as one of the anchors for the extraneous third hour bolted onto CBS mornings back in 2024, where he performed some fun genocide denialism during a live interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates over his book, The Message, which is part travel log, part condemnation of the Israeli occupation of Palestine. Yeah, Dokoupil took exception to even that mealy-mouthed denunciation of a genocide. Dokoupil's stint as CBS nightly news anchor has been, well, about what you'd expect looking at Bari Weiss's choices so far in her short tenure as CBS's editor-in-chief. He started the job on January 5th to 4.36 million viewers, according to Nielsen, 1.2 million less than the show had the same day last year. For comparison, the same night, ABC World News had 8.24 million viewers, and NBC Nightly News hit 7.21 million. Now this gets confusing because Dokoupil's debut event was the so-called Live from America tour, a crusade by Weiss and Dokoupil to get back in with the real America. If you're suddenly getting 30 Rock flashbacks, yeah, they really stretched that Stone Mountain episode.
We're going to find the perfect person for the show down here. Someone who represents the real America.
Jack, for the 80th time, no part of America is more American than any other part.
Into a 10-day tour where Dokoupil bounced between 10 American cities, mostly in the South, and was there in person with Bari Weiss and her $10,000 a day security team because she's that worried about something. That part's never actually been clear what exactly she's worried about. Except that tour didn't happen because Trump invaded Venezuela, murdered at least 32 Cuban officers, between 25 and 49 Venezuelans, and injured at least 100 others on January 3rd. And CBS News had to go full states media, sending Dokoupil out to do what he apparently loves to do most, sucking off fascists like Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth. Oh, and there was this fun flub during Dokoupil's first real show, according to the New York Times, because Bari Weiss rewrote the script literally minutes before the show aired live.
All right, to other news, as you just heard from Jill. Well, to other news now, to Governor Walz. No, we're going to do Mark Kelly. First day, big problems here. Are we going to Kelly here, or are we going to go to Jonah Kaplan? We're doing Mark Kelly, possibly demoted from his retired rank of captain in the Navy.
Needless to say, it's been a bad first 2 weeks on the job, but Bari Weiss knew how to fix it by preparing graphics for a new segment called Whiskey Fridays with Tony Dokoupil, sponsored by Jack Daniels. CBS staffers only learned of this at all when they entered the newsroom to see the graphics up. And since CBS is the leakiest ship in the fleet, we all heard about it immediately. This next bit is where it gets a little dumber, though. So I don't interrupt the quote I'm about to read. I'll be putting some pins in it to address in just a second. On the 14th, Alexandra Steigrad, a reporter for the New York Post, tweeted from a CBS rep, "This is not a segment for broadcast. This is not a real title. This is not a real sponsor. This is not a real story. This is simply an experimental mock-up the graphics team created with placeholder text for a potential non-televised in-person event." Pin the first. Yes, the New York Post, like the Daily Mail, is a tabloid rag, but they're both far, far right tabloid rags, so CBS reps actually respond to them, unlike when reputable reporters ask for comment. Pin 2, if it's not for broadcast, why was it set up as the backdrop for the anchor's desk? Pin the third, if it's not for broadcast, why did they need to clarify the title wasn't real? Pin the fourth, yeah, we know the sponsor is fake. Real reporters reached out to Jack Daniels, whose reps were quite confused, as they'd not had any contact with CBS. Point the fifth, as a rule, if states media reps, or really anyone, includes "this is not a real story" in the center of a response, it's definitely a real story. And pin the sixth, if it's for a non-televised in-person event, singular, why is it made for the anchor desk set? Why does it have a fake sponsor? And why does it say Fridays, plural? Were I a cynical mutt, rather than the basket of kittens and rainbows I am, I'd also say it's telling Steigrad, quote, posted the angle which doesn't include the news desk. Oh, and let me not forget the reminder that everything is about domination of the lesser for these people. After Trump gave an interview to DeCopel on Tuesday this week, he threatened to sue CBS if they edited it at all, after telling DeCopel he only had his job because Trump came to power. For the record, it's like 10 a.m. or I would have had a whiskey cocktail on hand ready to complete this joke. This story has been doing the rounds, but the headline doesn't quite match the reality. Well, actually, this headline does. So let's unpick it a little bit. Monster Hunter Wilds has performance issues on PC. No one is questioning that. Monster Hunter World did too. Capcom is kind of notorious for mid to barely functional PC ports, and Wilds was rough at launch, though it has improved a bit, largely off the back of modders, but official patches have helped a lot too. Last week, a video was posted showing massive FPS improvements after tricking the game into thinking you had all of Wild's nearly $500 worth of cosmetic DLC. In short order, a mod was published to Nexus Mods, enabling others to try the same trick, and after testing with the mod, plus actually test runs by Rock Paper Shotgun, who apparently still have one of the old games journalism Steam accounts, which, okay, so they don't technically own all games on Steam, but they can buy everything on Steam for free. Steam actually hasn't given out these accounts in years, and most of the old ones have been shut down as publications died, which, ooh, wow, most of them are just gone now, aren't they? So it's just kind of fun to see that any of them still are active. The FPS improvements are real, though most aren't seeing the staggering jumps that the OP found. They're mostly proportional with how close you are to the lobby counter where the NPC hawking the game's DLC sits. Sadly, it also doesn't really fix Wild's issue with random FPS hitching, though since it is generally increasing the FPS, it does reduce their severity. Weirdest part of doing this story on Wild's poor optimization, and, well, slow improvements as such, it's actually making me want to play Monster Hunter Wilds again. Now we get to the story that I didn't want to actually run, because many reasons. Look, this is the story I alluded to in the cold open, with that comment about not covering drama. If you're watching this show, you've probably heard about one or two trans women getting threatening letters from the FBI. Simply put, it's not true. To be clear, I'm not saying it couldn't or won't happen, but one, the FBI doesn't send warnings, they send armed SWAT teams, especially now that the federal government has decided they can just execute even white women in the streets. Additionally, letters of the alleged nature actually would normally come from the DOJ and are referred to as gag orders because mentioning you received one puts you in violation of them. The woman at the center of the issue was browbeat by a disreputable news site into sharing the alleged letter, and the whole image was obviously AI generated. It has all the classic signs of AI image generation, image artifacting, both on the document itself and on the table it's resting on. The wood grain on both sides of the letter don't align. The FBI seal is wrong. The signature and named agent don't match about half the words of that weird mess you get when you ask an image generator to produce text instead of generating the text and then attaching it to a different image. The problem is, everyone involved in this fiasco is either a fool or an actively malicious actor. The site, which I will not name, they don't deserve the traffic, is a gossip rag run by two trans women playing at being a pro-trans news source. It's existed since October and has run no less than 3 inflammatory stories baselessly attacking their fellow trans women, specifically racialized trans women, as well as those who don't fit their incredibly narrow trans medicalist ideals of what counts as transsexual. Kennel Me, one of their articles was so transmisogynistic, Evan Urquhart, the self-admitted transmisogynist trans dude who is the editor-in-chief of Assigned Media, wouldn't run it. The trans woman at the center of the ordeal is either so credulous she believed an obviously fake FBI letter, which I wouldn't completely put past her because she's fairly young, and there's overwhelming evidence at least 2 pieces she's written were actually created by, or at least in part by, ChatGPT, so I'd honestly believe she's AI cooked enough to think it passed muster, or has such a low opinion of her trans sister's situational awareness, she never considered fear-mongering would lead to people looking into her claims with more than the barest glance. And then there's the small section of trans women, besides the gossip rag, who've been trying to use the story to rehabilitate their reputations. First, Sophie from Mars, a trans woman who admitted to at least 2 of the 5 rapes of her fellow trans women she's been accused of since 2015, who jumped at the chance to get younger eyes, unaware of her reputation, on her YouTube channel by interviewing the woman at the center of this. Second was Lorelei Bailey, also an accused rapist of trans women, with a penchant for spinning up sock puppet armies, forming cults, and insinuating herself into trans tech spaces and taking credit for their work. Bailey is basically the trans woman version of Elon Musk. In this case, its latest incarnation, an AI sycophant dollspace.gay, acted as a third-party validator that the letter was indeed made with generative AI, and that the image it was sent, quick aside, the doll incarnation uses only it pronouns. It also speaks only in third person, was similar, but not actually the same image or letter as was sent to the rag of a news site either. Frankly, I don't trust a Lorelei Bailey alt to tell the truth once there's a chance to rehab its public image at the expense of a black trans girl. That's kind of its whole brand. Oh, and technically, she didn't need the image rehab because everyone forgets that she publishes the dead names of trans women she doesn't like, as well as the AI slop she publishes to scare trans women into paying for her writing. Alejandro Caraballo also decided to try and make waves over this too. There's a reason the only names I'm giving you are credibly accused rapists with a habit of using younger trans women's lack of awareness of their abuses, and it's so you can run away as fast as possible if they approach you. Leave everyone involved in this alone. Don't check in on them. Don't antagonize them. Don't hate watch them. Just leave them all alone, and maybe the few who are only credulous or young and foolish will learn from their mistakes. At least that's where I wanted to leave this story. But Kennel Me, at around 7 p.m. last night, after I'd written the rest of that, the trans girl at the center of this admitted the entire thing was a complete fabrication and that there was never any letter. I fucking swear every time I give someone the benefit of the doubt. So ignore everything I said about not using names. Tara Knight, aka Bundle of Sticks, made up the entire story. She used generative AI in her writing, both her Substack and her book. For fuck's sake, there's a fake Andrea Dworkin quote in the beginning of her last essay. The citation is literally a ChatGPT link. You don't have to generate shitty Dworkin quotes. A lot of her real ones are just shitty anyway. Tara has now repeatedly proven that she will just lie and sow harm and distrust. Everyone else involved is an abuser, and given Knight's book, well, pamphlet, complete with piss formatting and ChatGPT prompting left in, yeah, I've read it. It's shit. It's near incomprehensible. Is all about how she was booted from communities for unnamed abuses, which in the text she admits to perpetrating, but refused to take accountability for. I'm done treating her with kid gloves. Frankly, I'm suspicious how she just so happened to connect with multiple known rapists and abusers, often while or even after people informed her of exactly what they'd done, which she usually then asked for evidence for and ignored the evidence when provided. I, for one, sincerely hope Tara really does take accountability and make a real apology, which that Instagram post, yeah, that's not an apology. We all make mistakes when we're young, though few of us have written books about how accountability is a bullshit concept or made up stories about a federal gag order to stir up a population facing genocide. Every single person involved in this clout-chasing shit should not be trusted or engaged with until they actually make amends for the harm they have directly caused and, frankly, in many cases, profited from. But there is never an excuse to shit on them for their kinks, race, or transness, which a lot of people have been trying to do. I mean it. Those rats who jumped to shitting on Tara for her kinks or throwing racist dog whistles at her, you are worse than her in my eyes. You can just mute her. You can block her. You can just be done. Tara's burned a lot of trust and, frankly, has threatened other trans girls for calling out her obvious lies, but those using that as an excuse for their bigotry, they are the moldering rot at the heart of humanity. Not going to do a huge outro this week. Here's the schedule. More of OG Trigun in the Discord server tonight. Link in the description. I'm not going to re-record that one because I'm not redoing any more of this, damn it. I'm going to be playing the Rig Riot demo tomorrow on Twitch. It's an indie game wearing its Armored Core inspiration on its sleeve, so right up my alley. And then, like I said, I was feeling like Monster Hunter Wilds after reporting on it, so we're going to play some Monster Hunter Wilds on Thursday. Yeah, the rest of this week is going to be a little light because my girlfriend is visiting, and that will also likely affect next week a bit too, but Muttday 24 should still be out on the 26th, barring any unpredicted events, the nature of which I'm not going to speculate on. So let's head to the closing spiel before I risk curling the monkey's paw any more than I already have. As a reminder, everything I do, written, video, or streamed, is all brought to you by viewers and readers and listeners like you over on patreon.com/Fen and coffee.com/Fen for as little as $1 a month. So thank you very much to April, Fragile Paper, Manfred, Pinball Witch, Pimento, Rose, Writer Princess, and Yalk. I quite literally could not do any of this without your support. Thank you so very much.